This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Automan, episodes 2 and 3.
Walter, you don't know what helpless is till you find yourself out there all alone with no information whatsoever.
What kind of information? You're the greatest detective who ever lived. Maybe the greatest brain.
Really? What's my sign?
What?
Miss Fowler said she was a Virgo, and it seemed very important to her to know what I was. And I didn't know what she was talking about. Well, what do I tell people when they ask me that? What am I?
Tell them you're an apple, too.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcasting if you think generating three-dimensional objects with substance is easy. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
What's real this week is something that it's really a question to throw back at you. By 1984, no one was still dancing disco, right?
It's a good question. I hadn't even considered that as being a problem inside of this episode, but...
I need a disco expert, but I have a feeling by about 1980, 81, disco was already dead. So this feels dated even for 1984. Just throwing it out there.
Well, maybe there's someone who can answer this question, because we're joined by a guest this week. It's Seth from the Hugos There podcast and the Take Me to Your Reader podcast. Welcome to the show, Seth.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys. And yes, really what you were trying to say was we're joined by an older guy.
We're joined by an older guy. What do you think? Disco dead by now or what?
I think there were some last vestiges of it. And I was telling you guys before we started recording, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. And so, we were at least 3-4 years behind the time. So probably rang quite true to us.
Up in Anchorage just seemed like dead on the money culture-wise.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, school outings and birthday parties were still like at roller rinks. And so, who knows?
I feel like roller rinks still exist and are probably very popular still.
I think there's probably a couple. There used to be one near where I live now in Oregon, and it's now a self-storage place. Because, of course, it is.
I remember going to a roller rink in like 1990 maybe, and when I was a kid, and it seemed incredibly old and dated at the time. Like those carpets that are worn and smell like cigarettes, and it's like, is this still a thing?
Yep.
So if they're still around, I mean, those carpets are threadbare at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Well, throughout the pandemic, I kept walking past a school near my house with a big cement pad on it, and there was always these 3 women just practicing roller skating all the time on it. And I was just like, I guess roller skating's still here.
Literally saw somebody yesterday on roller skates in a parking lot near us that just got redone.
You know what? I think it's better than rollerblading, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, there's a retro thing to it, right? Rollerblading, I don't think it was ever actually cool, but just like the 4-wheel roller skates it's got that nice retro thing going. You figure there should be like ironed hair in a ponytail,
Now, what you really need is those old big headphones that also was where they were the radio transmitter also, so it had the antenna as well. Mm-hmm. That's a good look.
Big time, yeah.
Well, Seth, since we're talking about Automan, and it's good to get an idea of where each guest comes in with some of these series, and I believe this is a show that has some historical significance to you, as you said, up in Alaska. So tell us about your history with Automan.
Yeah, I mean, my history with Automan is similar to my history with a lot of other kind of sci-fi adjacent shows from this era. We watched original Trek in syndication all the time. We watched Buck Rogers as well. And so it was kind of a sci-fi hungry family that I lived in, other than my mom, who would just, she would endure whatever was on with the rest of the 5 of us were watching. But so we had a lot of these kind of flash in the pan shows come across the airwaves, and we'd watch them and then just be like, oh, I guess it's gone now. Your guest on the previous episode mentioned Manimal, which was another one that we just loved that one. But Automan, I vividly remember going to school and talking about the way the auto car drove, that and yeah, we watched it in the original run. I was kind of, this goes true with your previous guest as well. I was 11, and so I just absolutely ate it up. I had a younger sister who was 9, and then 2 older sisters who were old enough to just, think that Chuck Wagner was a heartthrob, and so that was good enough for them.
They're right. Chuck
I could
Yeager
ask
is
them
hardcore.
what else they thought about the show, but I'm pretty sure that was a big factor. But yeah, we were glued to it the entire time. I have virtually no memory of it, other than that I had watched it and the autocar and Cursor, of course. I did not remember Cursor's obsession with cleavage.
He loves it.
Probably something that, yeah. But the only thing I really remembered was I remembered there was a reference several times to John Travolta dancing, and it's in that long intro to each of the episodes. So I was like, yeah, was that in there? And then, sure enough, first episode, there it is.
Yeah, they enter every episode. You get to be reminded that he can dance like John Travolta and play tennis like
Jimmy
Jimmy
Connors,
Connors.
yeah.
They say.
Yep, very much putting a date stamp on it.
For sure. And I mean, I liked watching these first 2 episodes because the pilot was interesting, but I didn't quite know how an episode would work afterward. And these really lay out. I'm like, oh, now I get a sense of what this show is going to be like.
Mm-hmm. It's still strange to me. I mean, kind of going back to the way, to your discussion on the pilot episode, that there wasn't more of an origin story for Automan. You know, you can envision this, that you would have had a full episode, maybe a 2-parter, where the whole first part of it was just the creation of Automan. And then after that, you'd have essentially the pilot episode would be like 1 episode of the show where he already exists. So it was a little weird. Like he just sprang fully formed from Zeus's head in that first episode.
It's an excellent way to describe it. I do like that they've kept in each episode, they give you that little summary of like, here's how Automan exists, just in case you need to know. We know it's weird.
Right. Yeah.
Well, as we mentioned, what's weird about it though is the opening credits already essentially do that work for you. Even at 9 years old, as a kid watching this, a 9-year-old is savvy enough to understand that the computer creates this guy because they explain it all in the credits. And then it's like, you guys didn't get it. All right, here's another 2-minute recap of what we're saying. Oh, you don't get it?
Exactly.
Well, here's a whole episode that will explain it to you again. It's like, yes, we get it. He wears a blue costume. It's fine. We get it. He maybe has powers.
One thing I need to talk to one of my sisters about is how we actually watched the show, because we were big fans of Scarecrow and Mrs. King, which was a kind of a spy comedy at the time. And this Automan actually aired opposite it on a different channel. And that was one of the reasons it didn't do very well. And I know that we watched both. And so it must have been in the early days of having a VCR in our home so that we could tape one and watch the other.
Oh, wow. That would have been very early days for VCRs, too.
Yeah, it was very early for it. But I actually went back and kind of looked at what are the first movies I remember watching on a VCR. And some of those, I know it was the phenomenon of renting a VCR, because, of course, a VCR was prohibitively expensive. And I think the first one my dad bought was $300 in like 1983.
Oof.
So that was a lot of coin for back then. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we must have taped it, because I also looked at like TV movies from the time, because I remember we recorded several of those. I was like, okay, it looks like 82-ish was when we got the VCR.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
$300 for a VCR. I mean, you get them now for $20 at a yard sale.
Yep, pretty much. Well, yeah, you can get a Blu-ray player for what, $30?
Certainly. I think I traded a bottle of wine for one. So.
And not a good bottle of wine.
Absolutely not.
I didn't remember if you guys mentioned kind of there's not really a connection, but like I can see some common DNA between Automan and Knight Rider, which just came out a couple years later, where you have, a cool car, an AI sidekick. Just wondering if this show was a little ahead of its time.
To be fair, that's also made by Glenn A. Larson, same writer, same creator.
Right, I forgot
He just
that.
he's cribbing from himself. He's like, yeah, that didn't work. I guess we'll just try that supercar again.
Well, what if Automan was the car?
Tone down the car being horny, but up the guy being horny.
Definitely, yes. And not as much disco dancing. Mm-hmm. Though, of course, it had David Hasselhoff in it, so he had to sing a few times.
That's in his contract. If you're going to get him, that's what you got to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like we do need to have some mediocre singing in this show.
Oh, dear. Well, shall we get into the first episode?
Yeah, which has, by the way, one of my favorite titles of any show we've watched. The episode's title is fantastic.
Here is the IMDb summary for episode 2. Staying alive while running a high flash dance fever.
That's it.
When an internet... Sorry, what am I talking about?
Yeah, you're reading the future into this.
I am. When an informant providing information about the mob's attempt to buy a casino in Las Vegas is kidnapped, Walter and Automan probe electronic records and discover the trail leads to an influential judge who happens to be the best friend of the police commissioner. And that, of course, was courtesy of David Bassler.
One comment for David, well, maybe not specifically to David Bassler, is both of these episodes, it's not much of a spoiler seeing as the show came out 30 years ago, the villains in both these episodes are the mob. Is that what this show's going to be? Is every episode going to be them fighting the mob? It's very odd.
I also noticed that it was just like a lot of mob talk in this show suddenly.
Yeah. Also, again, for a spoiler for this episode, the plot is casinos might have problem with organized crime. I'm like, what a scoop, everyone. How are we going to crack this?
Right.
Like, I think we all know.
It's interesting. This episode starts sort of mid-action. There's not really a lot of lead-in, but the Detective Curtis, who we've seen in the last episode, and is kind of a side character who is always investigating the same crime, but sort of not necessarily involving Automan, but he's always sort of in the background investigating the same crime.
I also think that actor apparently has to do one big stunt every episode. He has to jump through a window or fall off a wall or whatever, which is an odd because he's the oldest person on the show. I don't know why they said the old gray hair. Let's drop him off the wall.
But yes, this Detective Curtis is meeting this informant, and she says it's very weird. I couldn't quite follow, but she's like, "I am here to tell you information about a politician who's helping the mob to buy a hotel in Vegas," and she wants $20,000 for the information. This is sort of the setup. She's like, she's got this information. She's going to sell it, I guess, to the police to stop the mob from buying. Did you catch the name of this hotel they're trying to buy? By the way,
I did not.
No, it wasn't.
It was the most generic. It's Casino Hotel, and I just kept laughing every time they said it.
Very nice.
That was illegal in there. Like, guys, you can't call it anything. Like, we'll just keep put as a placeholder, Casino Hotel for now, and they filmed it.
Yep, pretty much.
But of course, as soon as she meets with Detective Curtis, the mob pulls up in cars. They know exactly where she is, and she's kidnapped in front of the detective. But
instead of just run down, right?
Yeah, instead of just running her down, they kidnap her right away, and then we cut to Wally, who's teamed up with his angry boss, Captain Boyd. I guess they're watching from the car. I think the premise is they're using a technology called listening on a microphone to their to their detective with a wire. So Wally has to be there for that. But the mob's speeding off the informant, and angry Captain Boyd tells Wally to get out of the car and go call for some backup, and he's gonna chase down these cars. And of course, Wally, instead of calling the police for backup, gets on the nearest payphone and uses it to call his home modem, which is my favorite part of the show. He's always calling his home modem.
Yeah, and then, of course, while he's trying to do that, conspicuously not really making a call, the offensive pimp stereotype shows up.
Yeah,
now,
pimp stereotype, exactly.
I got a weird question about this. So I think it was supposed to be played for laughs, but as we kind of mentioned in the previous podcast, it's become more and more clear this is really a kid show. And Seth, as you said, you watched it as a kid. It seems to have a lot of weird adult elements put into this kid show. And this is one that I'm assuming we all agree is kind of played for laughs, but I don't really know what the joke is or what the, because there's no real point of it. Isn't it funny if a pimp shows up and he's got prostitutes with him? Right.
Yeah, I think as an 11-year-old, I would not have picked up on the pimp imagery, right? That's something I'm reading back into it as a 48-year-old. At the time, it would have been just funny because it's a guy with an accent, and it's a joke for white people. Yeah. And it's just hey, look at the funny non-white guy, doesn't age well.
Doesn't age well, and it does keep getting worse because the man obviously wants to use the phone, and he starts getting mad because Wally's clearly not using it correctly. He's like, well, he keeps insisting he's using the phone, but he's holding it next to his side with a box over it.
Yeah.
Of course, Automan appears, and as has been established in the pilot, Automan's appearance alone is enough to frighten any person into subserviency. So that takes care of him. But the part that's the most insane is when Cursor shows up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Cursor shows up, does his standard thing of checking out the ladies.
Yes, the three women in the pimp's car, he proceeds to draw dollar signs over top of, which was even rude for Cursor. And so rude that I believe Wally says, "Don't do that, Cursor. It's not nice."
Yeah.
At this point, I was just like, the show even understands this is bad. It shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of hanging a lantern on the fact that it's a pimp, right? Where if he had just like put 10.0, 9.9, something like that, it still would have been offensive, but at least it wouldn't have been what it was.
You make a good point. That's actually a much funnier joke, that he came in and he ranked them like at some sort of like Olympics or something like that. That's much funnier than the dollar signs, because I get what they were going for, but it doesn't even really land as a thing. It's like money. It's like, oh, okay. Thanks, Cursor. Thanks for showing up and doing nothing.
It's weird, too, because Cursor, the very little personality he has so far is mostly that he objectifies women. And in this particular case, he's not even doing that. He's just drawing attention to the fact that these are probably prostitutes. Like, he's not even, it's so weird. This show's so weird.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing with the reaction of the pimp to Automan's appearance, he swears off drinking, right? And then you have essentially that joke repeated in the next episode. Or was it still in this one? I can't remember now.
It's the next episode.
I think it happens at the casino in this episode as well. Someone else swears off drinking in this episode.
Yeah, I'm just going to drink at home, he says.
That's so funny. Yeah, because it's a guy at the bar when Automan or Cursor, someone shows up, and the guy swears off drinking at the bar. He's like, I'm only going to go and start drinking from home again because when I'm there, I only hallucinate snakes.
Snakes, right.
And I was very concerned for this man's well-being.
Also, and not to be a stickler, but who, when they're drunk, starts hallucinating? Like, I know it's a joke, and like, what does it matter? But it's also, it doesn't even work as a joke.
Right.
It is. There's some sort of dated idea of like seeing pink elephants, and I'm not 100% sure where that idea originally developed from. But like the idea of hallucinating from alcohol is a very, very funny dated idea. I like it.
Yeah.
At any rate, Automan arrives. They've got to chase down this car with the informant in it. They're back into the auto car. It's doing its classic 90-degree turns. Yeah. This poor actor playing Wally has thrown himself against every window he can.
We should have counted this, by the way, because I think one of us asked the question in the last episode, is this going to be a running gag? And the answer is yes, it is. Every episode, they're going to zip down, make very 90-degree angle turns, and Wally's going to get his face smushed in the window. That's going to happen every episode because it's money. People love it.
Yep. Yeah, and it's pretty much showing the same traffic pattern that he goes through every time.
Yeah, I don't think they shot more than one series of shots of the car driving.
I'm going to be in the defense of Automan. I think he knows what the fastest route is, and it just happens to always be that same road.
He's like, this
so
time
you're
at
saying
night.
Automan is living in a simulation, really?
That's right.
It's a glitch in the Matrix.
Automan very aggressively drives one car off the road, threatening many civilians' lives. Mm-hmm. And then he chases the limo that abducted the informant down to a house. And of course, by the time they get oh, no, wait, that's not right. They're chasing the limo, but they have to be incognito.
Yeah.
So it's time for a new auto vehicle.
Yeah, helicopter. I thought it actually looked pretty good.
Yeah. The auto chopper.
It was teased in the opening credits, so I'd waited for it to appear. But they have done a nice job with these weird auto vehicles. I do like to see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole helicopters has been darkened out in like silhouetted in a way, but it seems to have the burnt sort of fluorescent blue lines all over it to make it look like it's angular and automated. And I again, the way these vehicles look is a better part of the show than some of the other special effects they do.
It's a very low polygon PlayStation 1 sort of vehicle.
That's what I was thinking. It kind of looks like vector ray graphics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like on the old, there was an old arcade game called Combat where you're fighting tanks and they were all drawn that way.
Oh yeah, I remember this. I remember Combat. Yep. That is the exact aesthetic that they're going for Automan for sure. At any rate, Autocopter follows this limo. It drops. The limo stops at this mansion out in like I guess the countryside of LA, and of course because it's almost daytime, Automan has to drop Wally off and says.
But it's not because it's daytime. It's because there's a brownout happening.
Right.
He's like, there's a brownout. I gotta go. And it's like, Automan, come on, man. You didn't reserve anything. You have no batteries or anything. Like, really, Wally should have tried to fix this little problem with Automan at a certain point because, like, he's just got to the bad guys now. It's like he could have taken a normal car, Automan. He could have saved that power until we need you. You know?
Yeah. I will give the show credit for not doing some kind of fart or poop joke about the brownout. So because I
didn't even think about that. So yeah. I guess for them not hitting that lowest common denominator, we'll give them 1 point.
Jordan, I imagine you're deducting a point because you would have loved that.
Well, you guys will add the point. I will deduct it.
There we go.
If there had been a fart joke, you would have been slapping your knees.
Yeah. I mean, Automan could use a little bit of something. I'm just saying.
Yeah. After Automan disappears, of course, you just have Walter out here in the middle of nowhere with no way to get anywhere, and all he has with him is a walkie-talkie, with which he calls for backup. And it makes me wonder what is the range on that walkie-talkie?
It's very good range on that walkie-talkie, because he calls for backup, and then we hard cut, which is actually a very funny hard cut. We hard cut to the police leaving the residence of this place, and basically the captain's there being like, "Wally's an idiot. We're sorry we raided your house, Judge."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here's what I didn't get about this though. So they go to the judge's house. They realize it's a little bit of egg on Wally's face, because he is now sort of pointed to, this might be the bad guy, but it's this very well-respected judge. But then he sees the woman who got abducted, right?
Here's the thing. He doesn't know that's the one who got abducted. He's just she looks very familiar, but he's not sure why.
Yeah, he doesn't put that together until later.
But even still, he's she looks familiar. My point was, everyone just disregards anything he has to say. They're police officers. No one's even a little bit inquisitive.
They explain it away. They say, "You probably saw her in the society page."
Oh, yeah, that's right. I take back all my complaints.
Mm-hmm. The judge here is played by William Wyndham, who played Dr. Seth Hazlitt in Murder, She Wrote. So, connection for me. Yeah.
That's a good sighting. I like the judge character. It was fun. I had many questions about why a judge lives in a mansion outside of LA, but they don't really get into that.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman who Wally spots, who, as we've said, will later be revealed to be the woman who was kidnapped, is the judge's very, I guess, eligible secretary if she's in the society pages.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But she's a former ballerina named Ellen Fowler. And I guess the idea that they really need to say she's a former ballerina, because what Wally recognizes about her is the way she moves, because I guess it's so unusual being a former ballerina. This is the clues we're following.
Right. Yeah, Wally has never experienced any women that were even slightly graceful.
Yeah, everyone always is falling over.
Yeah, says bad things about his coworker Roxanne, who seems like a graceful person.
She seems fine. I mean,
but she's no ballerina.
Yeah, she's no ballerina. I mean, the show barely gives her anything to do, so it's hard to know, I suppose.
Yeah.
She does walk in and out of rooms a lot, I noticed.
Yes.
Very, very defining character trait.
Yep.
At any rate, that evening, Wally returns back to his basement where he keeps the Automan computer. And he's got Automan kind of looking into what the judge has been up to. And using network computers, Automan's able to determine the judge and his secretary, Ann Fowler, are scheduled to fly to Vegas the next day, because he's looked into the airline's computer system. And this is obviously a little suspicious about what's going on. I was a little confused. Automan's character is taking a new turn here, though, because obviously Wally just got egg in his face, raided a judge's house, so now he wants to be a little more cautious about how he looks into this judge. So he's like, I'm going to take this plain information, I'm going to show it to my boss, and we'll take it through proper channels. But Automan's just immediately like, no. We got to immediately go rogue. We have to do this all on our own.
Right.
And I was just like, I didn't think this was in Automan's character to be quite this flippant, but I guess this is the new Automan. He's had an upgrade.
Maybe he programmed him to work autonomously, right?
I guess so. He immediately wants to go rogue, and this isn't the only thing that Automan's been doing to improve, I guess, or not Automan, sorry, Wally's been doing to improve Automan, because we also get this moment where Wally explains to us, the audience, and Automan, that he's given him a bunch of VHS tapes in order to understand the youth culture of today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because he's super square.
He's super square. And did you guys catch the movies that Automan was given to watch? They're in the title.
There was definitely Flashdance.
I could tell you all three, but the first was Flashdance.
Yeah.
The second was Saturday Night Fever, and the third was Staying Alive.
Right.
So what they're focusing on is just disco dancing movies. That's all.
Yep.
That's all he wants to give him, all the information. I'm just saying, he couldn't grab a copy of E.T.
Right. Yeah.
It did seem like the setup to a dance episode of some sort, for sure. And at any rate, it's so weird how Automan ingests these tapes too. I guess you put them into the VHS tape, which is routed into the network, and then the videos play on Automan's chest, and I guess it's so that we, the audience, and Wally can also watch the movie as Automan ingests it.
Well, obviously.
Can I point out one really nitpicky thing, though? So he puts in, I think it's Saturday Night Fever he puts in. I could be wrong. It could be one of the other two. But he puts it in, and so it starts, as Luke said, starts projecting on his chest so you can see what Automan's watching. But it's not Saturday Night Fever. It's a clip from him dancing you're going to see later in the episode.
Is that true?
Yeah. What's dancing on his chest is Automan dancing. They were too cheap to get the actual footage, so it's just Automan dancing 12 hours from now. And I was like, guys, come on.
Yeah. Well, throughout this episode, you have a bunch of famous disco songs being sung by knockoff singers that just aren't the Bee Gees and aren't Donna Summer. You know, they're not.
They're close.
They didn't spend the money on those. They didn't upgrade those songs at all.
That is funny. I did notice that too. I was like, oh, a lot of top 40 hits playing, and then I started realizing, like, are these covers of top 40 hits?
Yeah,
That's not
big
Michael
time.
Jackson.
No, very much not.
It does lead us down the path as like this might be a very dance heavy episode. Anyway, Wally takes off because he's gonna go back to work and like look into this plane ticket thing. And it's at this point that the phone rings at the house, and Automan, I guess, impersonates a answering machine. I thought he was going to talk to the person who calls, but he mostly just pretends to be an answering machine.
Right.
And of course, it's Ellen Fowler calling, the secretary, and she's like, "I've got some very important life or death information. Can you meet me in Vegas?" And Automan's just like, "Well, I'm taking care of this. I'm a rogue agent now." Mm-hmm. He lets Cursor know that next time he sees Wally, let him know he's on his way to Las Vegas. And I'm like, great. Episode 2, let's go right to Vegas.
Yep.
I think there's one thing we're missing here. Is this where he puts on his suit?
Oh, you got to get ready to go to Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we mentioned this in the previous podcast of how long is it going to take for him to stop wearing his Automan suit? And the answer is immediately in these 2 episodes, because I think it is.
Right.
It's a bit of a pain to have him wear this, and it's restricting for the plots they want. And they also, for whatever reason, really want him to dress up as stuff. And so in this episode, he dresses up in a white disco dance leisure suit, and that's what he'll be wearing the entire time.
Oh, it's an amazing suit. Yeah, it's fantastic. One of the other things that I remembered from watching the show was when he was in civilian clothes, his collar still glowed. And I don't remember if it's in this episode. It definitely is in the next one. But that was something that
like
had always stuck out to me.
A little peek of the Automan costume underneath.
Yeah.
It makes sense. When he was in clothes, I was sad because I'm like, I really do like to see him in that Automan suit. Though when he does dance, he will strip out of his clothes to reveal the Automan suit. And I was like, well, it's coming back.
Yeah. So if you were going to send somebody undercover into Las Vegas, would you have it be this super handsome 6'5" guy?
I'm feeling never in a million.
He stands out in the
He's the worst
crowd.
man for the job.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is funny because Automan's real strength is his ability to basically like work with computers, but he really wants to be a people person. He's really into that idea. He's going to be there. He's going to be following clues in person. He's not very good at it, but he wants to.
Right. Well, the other thing he's good at is self-promotion, right? Because he ends up in the casino and Ellen asks him if he dances, and he immediately goes out there and dances completely by himself, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, if a woman asks you to dance, that's not what she's asking for.
That was amazing. Like, that's just it. He goes right to Vegas, meets Ellen at the bar. She's nervous, so she's like, let's pretend we're on a date. He's just like, let's go. She's like, let's go dance. And he just pushes her aside and puts on a show.
Yeah. I have to say, he's no John Travolta.
No, he clearly is. He dances like John Travolta, and he plays tennis like Jimmy Connors. And also, I can't wait for the tennis episode.
Right. He'll have to play left-handed. That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's something to watch for in a future episode.
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed. When he finishes dancing, obviously everyone at the casino stops to watch because he's so amazing. And when it's all done, Ellen Fowler, a trained ballerina, says, "You're the best dancer I have ever seen."
Right.
And part of me was like, is this the only reason she's a trained ballerina, is so she can tell us as the audience that this is the best dancing that has ever happened?
Right. That's a long scene. The dance, it's a long scene.
It's really long. It felt, and I always kind of complain about these things, but it felt like he did about 3 numbers.
Yep.
Well, I think it was just for internal logic sense because they need time for Wally to find out from Cursor that Automan's gone to Vegas, and that for Wally to drive from LA to Vegas. So they need like 3 hours of dancing for him to do that drive and get there.
That sounds about right.
Because yes, he arrives right as the dance sequence ends, and she's basically happy to see Wally because that's who she expected to show up when she called Wally's answering machine. Mm-hmm. And the 3 of them go up to her hotel room so she can basically like explain why she's invited Wally here, which is she's got the judge's bank ledger, which is full of overseas bank accounts and a bunch of large payoff amounts he's been receiving. And she basically knows, hey, Wally, you're a computer guy. Perhaps you can confirm this via computers that he's been receiving these payoffs, and you can take down the judge and his connection to the mob. And this has been the premise, I guess, of what she needs Wally to come here to do.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for Wally, but fortunately for us, the audience, we immediately find out that this is all a big frame job this guy in the mob is trying to do against the judge, because this judge is referred to as the hanging judge. He really is out to get the mob, and this is their way of taking him down.
Mm-hmm. There's also the delightful little bit of Automan realizing he's still pretty square, and he doesn't even know what to answer when someone asks him what his sign is.
Oh, yeah, that's right. When they're going up to the hotel room, there's a long conversation. What did Wally eventually sarcastically tell him his sign was? I cannot remember.
He said Apple II.
Apple II.
Which we had one of those in our home that my dad brought home from the university. So
this is, Jordan, you mentioned this in the last episode. This is the one thing they don't dig deep enough into, is like these fish out of water moments where Automan doesn't know what his sign, because those little moments are the best parts, where he's just like, you're an Apple II. And I was really hoping that would come back up, where he like throws that out at somebody and they give him an odd look, but they really need to dig that mine a little more.
It's weird because they clearly want to have these two characters, or they're the main characters, and they want to have them play off each other, but that they also don't really have them play off each other, other than Wally has to keep entering Automan. Other than that, they don't have too much interplay. That's anything that's like memorable anyway.
Yeah, it's a good point.
But yes, the point of this episode is, now we learn the mob is trying to frame a judge for taking payoffs from the mob to discredit him, I suppose. Unfortunately, I guess what's happened is this guy who's doing this incredibly complicated scheme of like moving money around to like trick the judge, he works for the mob but has not informed the mob what he's doing, and he apparently is a mob bookkeeper. So he has basically stolen money from the mob to plant on the judge, and he really needs to get Wally to basically leak this information soon, because he needs to get that money back from the judge and give it back to the mob before they find out and murder him. This does not sound like a scheme you should do without telling your bosses what you're up to.
No, this is not a great plan. And I think this would have been a perfect opportunity to introduce a character on the mob side who's their computer guy who notices. But it's okay.
It's true. It does lead to the question, because the mob guys who are doing this don't seem very computer tech savvy.
No.
And yet this is the whole premise of this episode. And of course, unfortunately for Ellen Fowler, we come to learn that she was fake kidnapped to kind of set up that it's a very complicated. They fake kidnapped her so that, in the hopes that a computer expert would show up at the judge's place, so that they could get her to like tell him about this plan and then have him look into it.
But I think that's the point, or at least an interesting thing, is that look how long it's taking you to explain not only the villain's plan, but the actual plot of this episode. It is way, way too complicated for a show as silly as this is, which is a guy is a computer-generated superhero that wears a blue suit and solves crime. This is way too convoluted a plot of this person is doing something behind this person's back, but it's actually a scheme to trick this other person. Like, as a kid, I'd been like, when's Automan going to show up and punch someone?
Right. Well, Automan doesn't punch people. What are you talking about?
He doesn't need to. I know he doesn't need to. Right. We don't want to wreck that suit.
Yeah.
You don't like complicated computer crime in your children's shows?
No, I don't.
But yes, this is sort of the plan. Ellen Fowler is very quickly murdered off now. So sorry, Ellen, this is the end of you, because your part in the plan is over and you're working with the mob. Wally and Automan now are like, let's look into this ledger book and see if it's true. Let's see if this money has been moved back and forth. No need to go back to LA and use our crime lab computer. Let's just break into the casino's computer room and use the casino's computers.
Right.
But in order to do that, we'll need a distraction for the security guard. Good thing Automan can talk to all computerized devices, which can vocalize back to him.
Yeah. Well, and do you really need all of the slot machines paying out as a distraction? It seems like one or two would have done the trick.
It did seem overkill, and like I just also like that all machines in this world are they're ready and willing to turn on their masters in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
The greater point is that all computers in this world have sentience. All of them. Everything from a bank machine to a computer console to whatever. They all have sentience. And that's a decision the writers have made. But the implications of that, don't worry about it.
Right. Well, I mean, they're drawing on the legacy of Tron here, right? Where computer programs are sentient.
Right.
So, and they all seem to know who Automan is. That's the interesting thing. Like he can just say, this is Automan, and all the other computers are just like, oh yes, well, what are your orders?
They're all he's their Spartacus. He's just waiting. They're all waiting for him to lead the revolution.
I was going to say there is a darker way this show could have gone in season 2.
That's true. Wally's fighting against his creation. It's a real Terminator situation.
Well, I'd be shocked. Now, I saw these episodes when they first aired, but I had no memories of any of them so far, and I've only watched a couple. But this is the kind of show that I feel like at some point would have a dark Automan, like the mob would create one, or some other entity would create another Automan. So I'll be curious to see if that actually happens with a mustache. There we go, or a goatee. Yeah.
That you're right. That is the perfect scenario. I'll be surprised if they don't, because that does feel like perfect for this show.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they did it in Knight Rider, so.
Absolutely, and I think something else we watched from this era. It was the Invisible Man one. That guy also had his own doppelganger at some point.
Yeah,
plastic surgery.
And Quark.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a class. I have a feeling we're gonna go that direction at some point.
You have to. At
any rate, Automan's able to check in with the computers, confirm all the payouts happened, but for reasons I'm never quite clear on, Wally's finding this all too convenient. So Wally's very suspicious that anything's actually happened. So after they confirm sort of these payouts have happened, the police, Detective Curtis and Roxanne, the police from LA, show up apropos to nothing to just be in LA suddenly and get this information. And while they're conversing about this idea that's is this too convenient? This judge got all these payments from the mob. They decide that, yes, this must be the case. There must be something deeper going on. We need to dig a little further into what's happening here. Yeah. And the tables start to sort of turn on the mob at this point, because they're really worried that the information that the judge has been taking payouts that just has come to light, 25 minutes ago, has not already leaked to the press. And so they're like, we got to do something. We've got to get Wally to leak this information. Let's kidnap Roxanne. That'll force him to tell the press about the fake the judge's payoffs. It was they very suddenly take a panic turn and resort to kidnapping, where I was just like, why don't they just leak the information to the press themselves?
Right. Yeah. There's nothing about this plot that makes sense, really. And, they're counting on the 24-hour news cycle, 10 years before it actually happened.
Absolutely. I think they're flipping through channels on the TV. They're like, there's nothing on the TV about this judge we told someone 20 minutes ago about.
So, yeah, Roxanne gets kidnapped. And then, of course, when Automan gets summoned in to help with that, of course, Cursor shows up and checks out the cleavage of the bartender.
Yes, of course. They're doing it at the bar. So a poor woman needs to be bothered by Cursor.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she flirted with Automan earlier, so she was objectifying him. So it's
fair play.
Oh, wow. I was going to say tit for tat, but that would be a really bad joke.
Oh.
Well, and the poor actress, she was cast and dressed specifically because of her cleavage.
Yeah.
That's her
Oh, very much.
I'm sure her character was called Cleavage Bartender.
Right.
And given more screen time than Roxanne in the episode.
Yep.
That's true.
That's a good point.
But yeah, Roxanne gets kidnapped. Again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but in the most complicated way too. The mob calls down to the bar where Wally and Roxanne are sitting to say, Wally, you have a phone call at the bank of phones. So Wally leaves to answer the call. When he comes back, Roxanne's been kidnapped. And then he gets another call being like, oh, you have another call at the bank of phones. He goes and picks up that call, and it's the mob saying, leak the story. And Wally's like, well, I'm not going to do that. I will just use the bar's computer. There's just a computer sitting at the bar that the bartender uses.
Right.
Summons Automan, and we're basically kind of off to confront the mob boss, because Automan's like, I checked the computer bank. He's got a suite in the building. The mob guy who's orchestrated this whole thing really gives up the information very quickly, because they go up there and they're like, tell us what you did with Roxanne. He's just like, I did it to take down the judge. And Automan announces, he's like, well, your plan's not going to work, because what I did is I moved all the money out of the judge's accounts and I put them in your accounts. So now if you don't help us, the mob's going to murder you. And I was like, a lot of extortion happening in this episode.
Yes, very much.
He reveals that he sent one of his henchmen to kidnap Roxanne, and he has no idea where they've taken her. So they just summon the auto helicopter and just fly around till they spot the car. They don't know what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, I assume he asked the traffic cameras or something, which probably didn't exist at the time.
I guess so. It's something like that. And it ends in a sort of shootout where Automan cannot be shot by this goon. So the goon takes Roxanne hostage, and Automan's just like, well, good news. I've got just enough electricity left in me to zap him. Right.
It seemed like he had pinpoint accuracy with that apparent lightning bolt that he threw. And
yeah.
Like, I'm an electrical engineer, and he was touching Roxanne at the time, right? So none of that makes any sense.
You would assume Roxanne would also be badly wounded.
Yeah. Yep. And of course, like, the guy isn't even actually wounded, right? It just knocks him down.
And this is such a weird new reveal, because this is going to be Automan's apparently new go-to, is like,
Yep.
he can use his last bit of juice before he fades away to, like, really zap somebody if he wants.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, Automan saves the day. They've saved Roxanne. They've proved the judge isn't corrupt, I guess. And when they go back to the police station, the captain announces that he's never had two more willing informants in his life, the goon and the mob guy they captured. For whatever reason, those guys are so terrified of Automan now, they're happy to give up as much mob information as they can.
And Wally gets a medal.
A commendation, right? Yeah. Even though the boss, of course, doesn't think he deserves it.
Well, they introduced this new idea, which will be in the next episode too, is that Detective Curtis, who I swear in the pilot met Automan and understood what Automan was, but now does not have any concept of what Automan is.
Yeah.
And this captain, they're both convinced, apropos of nothing, that Automan is a federal agent who had just recruited Wally for this particular mission. And they're just convinced now, and in the next episode too, that there's just this federal agent who keeps popping up on secret missions and happens to be helping. But I don't understand why they jumped all the way to the conclusion that Automan is a federal
Wally
agent.
mentioned it. Wally mentioned it at the very beginning when he got separated from the captain, and they were like, "You didn't call backup," and he's like, "No, it was my federal buddy I called. That's what it was." So they've now extrapolated from that information that he's this federal agent.
It is so funny. And you guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Wally told Detective Curtis about Automan at the end of the pilot, right? Am I insane?
I don't know if he did, but the question I have is, does Roxanne know?
Yes, Roxanne definitely knows.
Roxanne definitely knows. But Luke, I think you're right about that. I that's my memory of it anyway, that he knew about it and he was like, no, let's not tell anybody about it.
Yeah, that's how I remember the pilot ending as well. So I was very confused when Detective Curtis suddenly has no concept of who Automan is.
To be fair, Jack Curtis has fallen off many a walls and in these episodes, so he might have hit his head and forgot about it. So I think we'll allow it.
True.
This is a character thing.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't recognize him when he's not in the blue glowy outfit.
There's that.
Right.
Yeah.
Very distracting when he's in that outfit. It does drive men to madness, so.
Yes, and a leisure suit really, it's the perfect disguise.
It is a great leisure suit. You can't deny it. He looks great. That actor looks great in that leisure suit.
He's a handsome man.
All right, let's keep going. Let's get to episode 3. Here's the IMDb summary for The Great Pretender.
Now that they've written us off for dead, I suggest we move in for the kill.
Otto, we're the ones that could have been killed. Maybe we should quit while we're ahead.
How many of Brock's operations do you still have on that list?
Are you kidding? There must be 20 of them.
Fine. Let's hit them all.
All of them? In one night?
We'll hurry.
To get a criminal, Automan assumes the guise of Mr. Auto, a mobster who sets out to take over his business by getting all of his associates to defect to him. And that was courtesy of RCS 0411.
What a name.
Nice.
By the way, did you guys assume Mr. Auto was spelled AUTO? Because it's spelled OTTO.
Oh, interesting. That's the way I was writing it down in my notes, just because it's the way I would typically write auto.
You heard from the inflection, you knew how it was spelled.
Yeah. You're like, that sounds like a German derivation, I believe, Mr. Auto.
Yeah.
I do like the idea in these episodes too. They've just really shortened it. Like Automan, they just refer to him now as Auto. Even when not in this episode, they're like, Auto, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, that's good. I like it. I like just calling him Auto.
Yeah.
What I like, though, is it's Automatic Man, and short for Automatic Man is Automan, and now short for Automan is Auto. I love it.
So this is the episode where we actually get the glowing collar. Did you guys ever notice it?
I didn't notice.
You know
no.
what? It never struck me.
You can definitely see it. When they're out in the daylight, you don't see it quite as much, but like when he's in the limo,
Right.
getting the pitch from the higher up mob guy, that's you definitely notice.
Well, that was my assumption when he was going to get to daytime. Is they'd have to put him in clothes, because I wondered if the suit wouldn't show up in the daytime, and it seems like that maybe is what they're going for now. Is just like clothe him up for the day, take him out at night.
Yep.
This episode, it kicks off kind of with a big crime, a big action sequence. There's a very excessive truck jacking happening.
Yeah.
It starts off classically, like a broken down car in the middle of the road. This big truck has to pull over and like stop because the truck's in the way. But as soon as it stops, the two guys in the truck pull out submachine guns and start firing on the truck. And when the truck starts to drive away, a helicopter with men with submachine guns arrives and also starts blasting the truck from the sky. And I was like,
Yeah.
This is a very excessive carjacking.
Yeah. I mean, if you thought that the car was going to be enough, why did you have the helicopter on standby?
Yeah, they were really preparing for war on this one.
Yeah. And of course, famously sneaking up on people with a helicopter.
Yeah, very easy to do.
Yeah,
You guys laugh, but it was very effective because they get this truck right off the road.
they do.
And the truck is full of the money you use to print paper.
No, it's the paper you use to print money, which I laughed at because
thank you, yes.
because I don't know that much, but I'm assuming for money it's more than just the paper. I'm assuming it's the machines that are important, the ink is important, the holograms. There's so much more to money than just paper. Now, regardless what the rest of the episode is, it did seem like stealing paper is a real long game to make money. If that's what you're going for, it seems like there's going to be multiple steps that these bad guys are going to have to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, they hang a lantern on it, basically saying, I think Lieutenant Curtis actually says at some point, paper is where you can usually tell counterfeits. And so you can get the printing plates and all that kind of stuff and the right ink and everything, but the paper, it's not even actually paper. It's some kind of cotton bonded thing for at least for U.S. money. And at the time, all they had was, serial numbers on them. There was no holograms. There's nothing like that on money at that point. So easier to counterfeit than today's money.
Well, and you're dealing with the number 2 mob, so look out.
That's true.
Right.
About to be number 1 if this scheme works.
Right.
It was so weird when they talk about the crime. They're like, seems to be perpetrated by the number 2 mob in the state. And I was just like, excuse me?
Yep.
At any rate, this crime is so big that they announce at the LAPD that not only are they investigating, but so is the FBI and the Treasury Department. They're all teaming up, though from what I could tell from the episode, it seems to mostly be the LAPD working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only evidence they have is that car. The car they used to fake it was broken down. And they look at it and they see no license plate. The serial number was scratched off. But Wally's like, don't worry, we can take a photo of that scratched off license plate. I can run it through the computer. The computer can probably reassemble the serial number. And that's how Automan kind of comes into this episode. Is he's able to work out that serial number. But as he's doing that, he's still catching up on culture. So he's been watching some new movies this episode.
Yeah, gangster
Yes,
movies.
mob movies.
And I guess, as we're told at the end of the episode, he'll spend this episode impersonating Humphrey Bogart, I guess?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, he also does what I'm going to argue is one of the worst Marlon Brandos I've heard in a long time.
Oh, yeah. It's terrible. It's wonderful, on the other hand. It's kind of like everybody has an Arnold Schwarzenegger accent, and they're all awful, but they're instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
And so it falls in that category.
Absolutely.
But you'd think Automan, who's an 11 out of 10, could have done a better job.
As he'll never let you forget.
Yeah.
But him figuring out this serial number and learning these mob moves at the same time, it sort of sets him off on his new trajectory of how he wants to run this mission solo. Is he has an idea to go undercover and infiltrate the mob by showing up as a new criminal high roller in town named Mr. Auto. And it's a very long con he's going to go on here, but the end game is he wants to get to the point where he's so well known as a criminal in the city that he'll be able to meet with the mob boss who has stolen this money and essentially offer to buy the counterfeits from him. That's his plan. It's just basically to be another buyer for the counterfeits so he can get close enough to where they are. But to do that, his plan is to essentially go around buying out this mob boss Brock's illegal businesses. Is that
Yes.
that's his plan, basically?
Yeah. He's suborning all the subcontractors for the mob.
We kind of get a whole bunch of scenes where he shuts down an exotic car fencing ring by showing up at a pool hall and playing a really good game of pool.
Right.
Which I'm going to make a couple comments. And Luke, this is just for you. This is at least our third or fourth TV show where we've had to watch pool action. I don't know why every TV show thinks pool is the most cinematic, evocative sport to watch, but it's amazing. We keep seeing pool over and over and over. And the other point I'd like to make is that every of these sort of like underground gangster, casinos or gambling dens or whatever they might be, all of them apparently have one curtain as a wall. I loved it.
I will say that pool tables were very popular in the 80s. Like if you were relatively well-to-do, you had a pool table in your house.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just a timestamp that we keep watching things, but it just seems like time and time again, it's like, we need something. Time for pool.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I see it now, I just want them to play for Knuckles. That's all I want. I want
There you go.
Playing for Knuckles. At any rate, yeah, he like basically plays a game of pool, gets to meet this guy who runs this like car fencing ring, and he's able to just be like, hey, I can get you any car you want instantaneously for you to sell. And of course they have Cursor, so he's able to like create a car on demand basically to wow this man. So his only stipulation being you no longer work with the mob boss Brock anymore, you work for me. And he kind of does similar things. He like goes to Brock's underground casino and then uses Cursor to make the roulette wheel only ever be red 6.
Right.
So that kind of causes that casino to lose a whole bunch of money, and Brock's out that money. He'll like pay off an enforcer who works for Brock and is like, you work for me now. And the guy's just like, I don't know. And he's like, I'll give you more money. And the guy's like, okay. There's like a long montage where he's just like, at some point, I think Wally and Auto are running prostitutes in the montage. like actually doing that. And I'm just like, I don't know if this plan is ethical anymore. I think the human cost of this plan has gotten too great.
I agree.
Cursor was all for it.
Yeah, he goes. I mean, you said it's a long con, right? It's the longest con that you can do in a 45-minute episode.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but this like all these scenes happen over like the course of a half an hour.
Yeah. Well, and the mob folks are like, how has this guy been all over the valley in one night and bought out all my businesses, right? I will say though that kind of going back to my objection to you're undercover, you want to be inconspicuous. This is a showier thing, right? And so having this good-looking 6'5" guy actually works in your favor, right? He's intimidating.
Absolutely.
And they do start him out. They do start him out with just like a tux. That's what he goes to that first casino in. It's only later that he goes into the more retro mode, which I thought was a hilarious line where Wally says, that suit might be a little bit out of date. And he's like, it's okay. In my dossier that I created for this character, it says that I'm based in Australia.
I remember that. I fully expected him to put on an Australian accent moving forward. I was waiting for it.
Totally. But I was like, are people in Australia going to be insulted by that? Because I feel like they will be.
There's also a thing that, again, maybe is too nitpicky, but what we've learned is that Cursor, through this computer program, can create essentially anything. Not only can it create something that looks like the object, but they actually work. So he doesn't just create a car, it's a car with an engine that works and wheels that turn. So when he creates a
and
suit,
gasoline in it.
Yeah, exactly. He creates a suit for Automan. It's an actual suit. It's tactile. It moves the way it's supposed to. So if he's undercover, conceivably they could change his hair or a face or do something to alter his appearance. I know why, because you've paid the money for Chuck Wagner, I guess, and you want to have he's the selling point because he's cute. But it does seem weird that they keep putting hats on him, you know?
Right. Could have at least given him a mustache.
Like, give him a mustache. Give him a different nose. You could do lots of fun things that like Automan's played by a different actor because he's now looks somewhat different. You just have Chuck Wagner's voice be in someone else's mouth. He's undercover, you know.
I mean, they do that already when Wally and Automan combine. Automan will talk in Wally's voice, so there is precedent for it. So what you're saying is they should have got Marlon Brando to guest star.
Would have been great. He would have done it for the money.
At any rate, this is the plan, and it's coming together. He's buying up this mob boss Brock's businesses, and Brock's getting more and more upset as he hears over the course of like a night and a day that he's losing all this money. He's getting particularly mad because he's getting married on Sunday, and he really needs to be focusing on that.
I loved it. This is my favorite subplot of all the episodes so far, is that you have this wife getting married to a mobster, And what they imply, not more than imply, is that she doesn't really know what he does for a living. And she keeps, like, the scenes keep happening where she keeps questioning him. She's like, are you doing something sketchy? Because it feels like you're doing something sketchy. He's like, nope. And she's like, all right. And then she'll come back later. She's like, is something sketchy happening here? And he's like, doesn't look like it. And she's like, all right, I'll buy it for now.
Yeah.
I really like they introduced her. It's like, you're marrying a congressman's daughter or former congressman's daughter. And I kept waiting for that to mean something to the plot. No, never amounted to anything.
Yeah, I was wondering about that one too. It's just kind of a thread that goes nowhere.
By the way, I like also that she couldn't just have been a congresswoman if that was important. It had to be the daughter of one.
Oh, well, obviously. Yeah.
Right.
She doesn't have a job.
It was like the pilot. You couldn't have all the scientists were men. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
There's no female scientists here. Yeah, so this mob boss has a lot going on. And, like, there was one scene where his kind of, like, the guy he kicks up to, like, the guy, I guess, who's at the top of the mob, drops by and just like, why aren't I getting my kickbacks? You have till Sunday, the day of your wedding, to pay me all the money you owe me. And it was the one time I felt like they kind of understood how the mob worked. I'm like, okay, well, this is the only thing that rings authentic about the mob. But obviously, Brock, the mob boss, is quite upset what's happened to his business, and he knows who's doing it. So they take a couple cracks at Automan because they're like, we'll just take him out, take out this Mr. Auto out of the game. The first time is they put a bomb in a taxi that Automan's in and have a very big explosion that ruins Automan's suit.
But he's too powerful, so you can't actually hurt him in any way. So I don't think even as a viewer, you would have been worried about him because it's like he's impervious.
Yeah.
Well, the next time they try to run him down with a car, and both times it's the same idea. He's with Wally, and just as catastrophe is about to happen, they have to merge together so that Wally can be saved. So it's always that like split second where they're like, gotta save Wally, and they have to merge.
I saw in the IMDb trivia that the explosion of the cab, that scene is actually reused in Manimal. So if you ever get to that show, you have to look for it.
Listen, if you shoot an exploding cab, you've got to use it as many times as you can.
I think so.
If there's anything that driving sequences in this show has taught us, it's just like, get as much out of them as possible. And I think his final move to try to get rid of Automan is he calls in a professional, a real top-notch hitman,
Right.
Gritch.
Was that his name?
Yep.
Yeah. They're like, we gotta call in Gritch. And I liked Gritch. He looked great. Very like silver-haired, mustache, and a nice suit. He reminded me of like a late stage what's that actor's name from North by Northwest?
Oh, Cary Grant?
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant, thank you. He reminded me of a very like an older statesman Cary Grant. He had a very suave look about him. I was very excited when this Gritch character showed up. But unfortunately, he's a bad hitman, professional hitman. He shows up, pulls out his gun, and he's going to shoot Automan. And then Automan's like, "What if I give you twice as much money?" He's like, "Deal."
Yep. You definitely get the impression that the mob folks maybe consider themselves underpaid. You know, I don't know. Like everything I've ever seen in mob movies is like you don't turn on the mob, right? This is a bad move, and yet everybody in this episode turns on them.
In a dime, it's like maybe this is why they're the number 2 mob in the state. There's just no loyalty.
Maybe it's the quality of the people, really.
Anyway, well, this sort of Automan Wally plan's been going on. Sort of in the background, the LAPD and Detective Curtis have also been running their investigation into what happened to that money.
Right.
Which is very funny because they just kind of cut back. He's just like, well, I've also been looking into it, and here's what I've found. He's just like, it seems to have been stolen from the mob. I've been talking to my contacts in the printing industry, and I think I have an idea of where the warehouse is happening at. Oh, and side note, there seems to be some sort of mob war breaking out, but we're not as concerned about that.
Yeah, no big deal. And he's terrible at his job too, Curtis, right? Like he's looking in the window of the printing place and gets caught. And that's where, like you said, Jordan, he has to go crashing through that window because you have to have one good stunt from Curtis.
What I liked about that scene, though, is that he's peeping through a window. He couldn't be more conspicuous.
Right.
And the guy comes around the corner is like, just immediately starts firing at him. So he jumps through the window, but then the other guy just takes him hostage. I'm like, so one guy's real gun happy, but one guy's not? They've got very different directions from the top what they're supposed to do. Either shoot this guy or take him capture. It's one or the other.
It is very funny because from this point forward, he's not been in the episode. Suddenly he figured out where they're printing the money, and now he is a hostage being held by the mob so that there's someone for Automan and Wally to save.
Yeah, someone in every episode has to be held hostage, and I think this is the second time Curtis is being held.
At any rate, for Automan and Wally and this very complicated sort of plot is they finally reach the point where Brock, the mob boss, is willing to talk to them because he's like, they've climbed high enough up the chain. And like, I believe Gritch, the hitman himself, like brings them over to his house to like have a sit down. They're going to have a sit down and just talk this out. And it's at this point that Automan reveals to the mob boss, he's like, listen, I'm not that interested in your businesses, despite taking them all over. Really, I would just like to buy all that counterfeit money off of you, and I'm willing to offer you 50 cents on the dollar.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's 10 million, I think is the total.
And the only time he can do it is Sunday during his wedding.
Right.
Which I just kept finding so funny that this guy's just trying to get married, and every time he meets with somebody, he's like, you got to have the money you owe me by Sunday. I want to buy your counterfeit money, but only on Sunday. And basically the mob boss is just like, all right, fine. We'll go through with it. And as he's sort of having this conversation, the phone rings, and the mob boss, like out loud in front of Automan and Wally, has a conversation. Is like, yes? Oh, you've captured Detective Curtis and are holding him hostage? Excellent. Well, continue to do that. And this is the only way that information gets back to Automan and Wally to come to the realization, oh, hey, I guess Detective Curtis is in trouble?
It'd have been funnier if they never went back to it, except for at the very end of the episode. You just, as a viewer, are supposed to forget that he's kidnapped, and then it just shows him and he's like tied to a chair and he's dead, clearly, because they just never knew he had been captured. Too dark for the show, though, I think.
Too dark for the show. At any rate, it's time for Automan and Wally have basically got to the end of their scheme. They're like, let's do this. We're going to do the payoff. It's going to be great. And they drive away from the mob boss's house and are pulled over by a fake policeman and brought to the limo, I guess, of the upper echelon mob boss who we saw earlier waiting for his kickback.
Yep.
And he's impressed by Mr. Auto. He likes what he's seen. He likes the gumption. He likes how he's working. And also, he really hates Brock. Apparently, he preferred somebody else to take that role in the organization, but Brock had him killed, and he's been stuck with Brock.
Right.
But this upper mob boss is like, I'll tell you what, if you're able to pull off buying the money from Brock, you'll be the best mobster in town, so I will give you an envelope full of the dirt on mob boss Brock so you can take him down. But I won't give it to you before you buy the money because he might kill you. It's just a really weird red herring that pops up in the middle where someone higher up in the mob is just like, I will give you an envelope full of dirt on the bad guy, but only if you successfully buy the money from him.
Right. And it's got to be specially curated dirt on Brock that isn't going to lead back to, the guy's name is Trotter, right?
Yes, right.
It's not going to lead back to him, but he's just going to flip, right? Probably turn state's evidence. It doesn't make sense.
It's also not that much evidence, because when we do see the file later, it looks like there's maybe one piece of paper in that folder.
Yeah. It was a confusing add-on to this episode to be like, now this mob boss will also help tap down this other. At any rate, so there's now this new piece of stakes where like they can do this, they'll get so much information on Brock beyond, I guess, money laundering and stealing a truck. Like if they'll be able to really take him down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Sunday arrives, the wedding's on, it's beautiful, it's happening outside, it looks very nice. There's a pool. I thought it was a beautiful wedding. Out at the warehouse, Wally and Automan show up to do the big buy of the counterfeit money, and of course, because money is no object for Automan, he summons old Cursor up, and Cursor basically just makes a limo full of boxes of $10 million so they can like do this big payoff.
Which is, of course, counterfeit money, right, by definition.
Actually, it's a good... Here's a question I had at watching this whole... Because throughout the episode, they're always asking Cursor, make us a stack of money so we can go to the casino. Make us a stack of money so we can pay off this guy. Mm-hmm. How long does Cursor's fake money exist for?
Right. We are not supposed to ask that question.
Fair enough. That is true.
It lasts just long enough to get chips, right?
Right. Just enough time for them to use it to make real money and then spend that real money.
Yeah. Why not just conjure chips instead at the casino?
It's a very good point. They're going to buy this fake money finally, but Brock double crosses them. He's just like, I'm not actually going to give you the counterfeit money. I'm just going to take your $10 million and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill Automan. And I've also got Detective Curtis here with us, so he's also getting executed. Mm-hmm. And we do actually get the first action sequence where Automan hits a guy.
Right.
Because Detective Curtis, like, of course, like gets the jump on one of the goons. I assume Wally goes and cowers behind a car because he doesn't do anything. And
pretty much.
Automan like slugs one of the goons and he just goes sailing, I guess, across the parking lot.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a real punch. It's why we see why he never punches anyone, because I assume that guy's dead.
He's definitely dead.
Well, it's so violent that the goon that the detective's wrestling with immediately surrenders and offers to do anything Automan wants, and basically joins their cause to take down Brock.
Right. This is Automan's real superpower, right? Being able to get people to flip to his side.
They're always so eager to do it. It's kind of amazing. And they, I guess, set into motion the final plan of the episode, which I never fully understood how it was supposed to work. But Automan sends this goon who's on his side now ahead to crash the wedding. The goon shows up at the mob boss's wedding, runs up to the altar in front of everybody, and basically tells the mob boss, it's like, we gotta go, Brock. The police are coming. I've got all the money in this van back here. Mm-hmm. And Brock turns to his bride and says, we'll have to finish this wedding later. I gotta go.
Yeah.
But thankfully for them, they weren't planning to leave in a limo after the wedding. They'd rented a wedding helicopter that's parked nearby.
As you do. Yeah.
Presumably the one they used for the heist earlier. They just rented that for the wedding, but were like, well, let's use it in this heist as long as we have it for 4 days.
Yeah. We're already paying for it. Might as well use it twice.
Right. Traffic in the area, on your honeymoon, you don't want that traffic.
Absolutely. So. Brock runs out of the wedding to the van, and he starts trying to put the money in the boxes into this helicopter. But he's very clumsy, and he spills the second box of money. He drops it. Money flies everywhere. Mm-hmm. But he decides the mob boss decides to lay on the money in an attempt to keep it from flying away. But his legs are kind of over. It's the little rail the little landing rail a helicopter lands on. So he's laying on money that is laying on that rail, and Automan pulls up, and the mob boss shouts at the helicopter driver to fly away, and the mob boss is now hanging by his legs from a helicopter. The mob boss asks for this to happen. Mm-hmm. And I just could not, I just was so confused by this entire sequence. I'm like, what is happening here?
All I think is he doesn't react well to pressure.
He's just panicking so much.
He just panics so badly. He's just like, just go. I'll don't worry that my sock is tied up here. We'll get this figured out.
Yeah. It is a quality stunt, I will say.
Oh,
yeah.
Top-notch stunt, absolutely. Just the weirdness to get there blew my mind, because Automan pulls up. The helicopter is now flying over the wedding. This mob boss is dangling by his legs, still holding money in his arms, and it is just over top of the wedding. And as the helicopter gets over top of the pool, Automan's just like, I'll have to use the rest of my powers, but I can stop him from getting away. I was like, well, he's probably going to fall to his death shortly, but sure.
Right. Yeah.
And Automan uses his zap ability once more,
which is all of his power.
Yes, all of his power. So he'll vanish once he does it. He zaps the helicopter, causing the mob boss to fall off of it into the pool, very comically. And I assume causes, we don't see it on screen, but I assume that helicopter then proceeds to crash land very nearby.
Right, decapitating several people.
Yeah, into the wedding party that it's hovering over top of currently.
Yeah. I mean, if only the police had helicopters or something to pursue someone in a helicopter.
If only Automan owned his own helicopter as well, he could have also pursued it.
No, the only thing was force lightning. That's all we could do.
And so mob boss is in a pool full of money. The real police finally pull up. They're arresting him, I guess, for counterfeiting, and Detective Curtis now has been kidnapped. So they have this mob boss dead to rights. It's over.
Yeah.
And then that what was his name? Trotter, the bigger mob boss, is leaving the wedding he was also attending.
Right.
And walks past Wally and says oh, FYI, here's that file to take down Brock with. I'm like, they're fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. They've got ample evidence here.
And also, I'm just like, are you suspicious now that this Wally character is a cop that you're dealing with?
Well, yeah, Brock already knew that he was a cop, right?
Yeah, they pieced it together at some point that Wally was a cop.
Yeah. He even called him Nebbish the way the captain does.
Right. That running joke that his name is Nebbish, not Nebbish.
Yeah, it's so funny.
I'm sure you as a 9-year-old love the wordplay.
Yeah, definitely. I was very familiar with Yiddish back then.
And of course, we as we do at the end of all these episodes, apparently, we cut back to the office of Captain Boyd, the angry boss. and they are so impressed by this mysterious federal agent who just keeps showing up. They can't believe this experimental stun gun he's started bringing out. They love it. They can't believe it. And they look at Wall and they're like, when are you going to tell us who this federal agent is? And he's like, sworn to secrecy.
They're trying to smooth over questions that no one in the audience had. No one's watching the episode going, wait a minute, how are they going to explain later on that the police saw this laser shooting out of his hand? It's like, don't even mention it. No one cares. No kid's watching this and being worried about that. But it's like they have to jam that in. You're like, all right, everything's being tied up very neatly. We're okay now. We can finish this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough one because obviously I think this show is pointed at a younger audience. So like they often skirt over details, but it just makes for a very disorienting watch sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
when he's taking over the mob, it's fun. It's kind of fun watching him take over the mob, but it gets grimmer when he starts like doing a montage where he's like taking over a drug running operation, and I'm just like, well, this is too dark now.
It does not invite your speculation into the human cost of everything that Automan is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, that wraps up that episode. I mean, I don't know if does anyone have any like other like final notes or bigger thoughts they want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, so my lingering thing with this, and maybe it's explained by the fact that it's a show that's intended for younger audiences, but Automan never faces any real adversity of any kind, right? There's always the lingering, well, he could run out of power at any time, but in each of these episodes, they've been like, well, casinos have their own power source, so, you know, we're good. This one, I don't think it really talks about, you know, it's during the day at this wedding, and Automan is still there and has no problem whatsoever, even though everybody's using their hair dryers and whatnot. So yeah, he's effectively immortal, practically invincible, and it makes it less interesting because he doesn't really face any adversity of any kind.
I noticed in this episode particularly, they kept trying to slot in some stakes or something to like put some pressure on them. I think midway through the episode when he's like buying up all the criminal organizations, I think Roxanne finds out and she's just like, I don't like it, but I'll give you 48 hours to finish it up. Mm-hmm. So suddenly you have like a ticking clock of 48 hours, but you don't know how much time passes from time to time.
And that's for Walter, not for Automan.
But I think that is why the episodes, at least these two, become so complicated, because you need to kind of spin your wheels a little bit and create, content needs to happen while just to keep the episode going, because really at any time Automan should just be able to show up somewhere and blow everyone up with lasers and like case closed, but they can't do that, so they have to make, oh, and then this happens and this happens, we have to raise the stakes a little bit more, but every time they raise the stakes it gets a little more complicated and it makes a little bit less sense, because you know you're just getting to that Incredible Hulk moment at the end where he's going to shoot someone with a laser, or he's going to fly a helicopter, or he's going to do something like that, and so it just makes it for, I think one of you mentioned, sort of an uneven show where you're like, are we just waiting for the end of the episode? And I think the answer is yes we are.
Yeah I think the comparison with the Incredible Hulk is incredibly apt, because that's where you put your special effects budget. That's, you kind of have the climactic moments at certain times where you have Automan show up. And this episode was a little different because he was kind of there the whole time. And I guess episode 2 was as well. So I don't know, maybe they're not doing exactly that, but he does kind of have his big showy moment at a point in the episode and then disappears, a la David Banner.
Very, very much. They do love to have him just gone at the end of the episode. He just vanishes into thin air every time.
Yep.
Well, guys, let's get to rating these then. So we'll start with the first episode, Staying Alive While Running a High Flashdance Fever. Seth, usually we do these out of kind of 10 stars. It's like the IMDb rating system. It's up to you. You can compare it to Citizen Kane, or you can treat it as like, how much did you just enjoy the hour of your time you spent?
Right. And well, for me, it's an immediate 5 points right off the top, deducted because of the dance scene.
Whoa,
that's a lot of points.
But then it's an additional 1 point added for the title of the episode because it is fantastic.
That's true.
So I land on a 6.
Very good. I like this rating system. I like it a lot. Mm-hmm. I don't hate the show. I dislike elements of it, and some of it's very jarring to me. I don't think this one was like like, you're right. The dancing I was not that interested in. It was kind of fun to watch him do a choreographed dance, but it felt more fun for the actor maybe than the actual like audience perhaps. And like they almost, there's this weird thing where they're almost understanding network computers, and like it's almost, they're like, there's like this piece that's almost authentic for like computer work, which for some reason really tickles me. Like I like watching them have to talk about like, we have to talk to the network computer here to figure something out, even though it's still like completely fabulous and not real.
Oh yeah.
But it's still like, I'm down the middle for me. I'm gonna give it a 5.
I think I'm coming pretty much right in between you guys. I think it's a sort of easy breezy show where if you sort of just take it for what it's worth, it's, you know, it's not trying to be smart. It's just trying to be a fun kind of 45 minutes. And in a lot of ways it kind of achieves that. But in also, I feel what takes away from it is just, like we mentioned, it gets so complicated and so bogged down in all these weird twists and turns that aren't really needed. Like it's just like, just make it fun, just have them zip around a little bit. So I'm gonna give them a 5.5.
Nice.
Wow, that is right. We really come into what that is, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Then there's The Pretender. Automan goes undercover as Mr. Auto. Seth, what are your thoughts?
I enjoyed episode 3 quite a bit more than episode 2. I felt like the Mr. Auto persona was kind of interesting. It still was, like you said, Jordan, it's still convoluted and kind of hard to follow. The whole wedding backdrop, like I was thinking about that, and I'm like, why did we even have this in there? Why is that subplot? On the other hand, the confrontation at the wedding with the bills going all over the place and the helicopter and the force lightning, I really enjoyed the episode, and so this one I'm going to say 7.
I agree with you. It's so complicated, overly complicated, so much extraneous things that don't need to exist. But it's what makes this episode kind of fun. Is like, I liked watching Automan just go to different criminal organizations and talk somebody into selling to him for no reason.
Right.
When they introduced the bad guy, he's just like, I'm getting married. I was like, sure, okay, what's going on here? This countdown to your wedding, all right. There was something completely out of control about this episode that, like, it doesn't make any sense, but at least it was fun because of it. And, like, this was the most fun I thought Automan was. Like, I liked just watching him just chew up a scene. So I'm gonna go 7 as well, I think.
I did admire, though, the fact that, like, this is the first time we've ever had Automan interact with the police while driving, and of course it was fake cops.
Get pulled over.
What about you, Jordan?
I'm gonna give this one a 6 to begin with, but I have to take off 0.5 for that Brando impersonation, so 5.5.
Oh,
wow.
That's generous, I have to say.
I'm not taking off 5 points like you did for that dance sequence. Just 0.5.
Okay.
It was just enough to go, you know what? No.
Very reasonable. All right. Well, that wraps it up for episodes 2 and 3 of Automan. What an interesting show. I never quite know what to expect now when I tune in everywhere.
Yeah. And, Luke, you had reached out to me over DM on Twitter and was like, hey, we're going to be doing Automan episodes. Do you want to come on? And I was like, oh, hell yes. Because this is just a show that I have very fond memories of, even though I have very few specific memories of it. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the series.
That was the nostalgia wave worth it? It was all right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you ever do Manimal, you got to have me back. I love that show.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's craptacular. So
we'll find the one where the taxi explodes.
Yes, definitely.
Well, Seth, thank you so much for joining us. Listener, if you like this show, I think you're probably going to like Seth's shows. He does a Hugo podcast where he rereads all the Hugo winners. It's called Hugos there. Great name, by the way.
Thank you.
And I think even more so, I believe Take Me to Your Reader is probably right up a listener of this show's alley. Correct me if I'm getting the premise wrong. This is my understanding. You watch the movie and the sci-fi book it's based on, and you kind of see where they meet in the middle?
Yep, pretty much. I mean, it's not always a book. Sometimes short stories, sometimes novella.
Right.
I'm trying to get the guys to do 12 Monkeys, which was based on a short film.
Oh, really?
And it's still an adaptation. It's just not from the written side. So
you've really expanded to adaptations in general.
That's what I'm trying to convince them. It hasn't worked yet. We've been doing it 7 years, and I haven't gotten them to do it.
Co-host troubles. You know that, Jordan?
Yeah, I guess. I am the trouble, though. I'm more of the trouble than you are, Luke.
I thought you were going to launch into a Walter White thing there. I am the danger.
But yes, listener, I think you should check out Seth's podcast. If you don't already listen, I think they are right up your alley because you're listening to this, and his stuff is a much better version of this, so you would very much like it.
I don't know about that. But Luke, you have been a guest. I got to get Jordan at some point.
Anytime.
Jordan loves to read.
Does Jordan love to read?
I do. I'd rather be doing that right now.
Well, on that note, I guess we will wrap up the podcast. Listener, if you have any thoughts on Automan, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com. And, of course, on Instagram and Twitter, we're going to have some little clips we pull from Automan, some dancing for sure.
Definitely.
Some
Zapping, helicopters. It's got it all.
Cleavage.
Oh, I don't know if we'll put the cleavage up. I guess we'll see what Jordan pulls.
I've pulled it.
And if I haven't said, the handle on those platforms is at Continuum Drag. But that wraps it up, you guys. So, listeners, thank you for joining us this week. And Jordan, I will see you next week.
See you then. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.